Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris Stone. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. So, Nick, this is Friday before the Super Bowl. So when this podcast gets released on Wednesday and everyone can see how wrong we were about our predictions, any thoughts on what the outcome of the game might be?
Well, I just want the... obviously, there was a bit of a storyline from the business perspective with Pat Riley owning the rights to three-peat, which I found was just quite interesting. And he's going to, I think, make at least 6 or 7 figures out of the fact of that if the Chiefs do end up getting the three-peat. I think now Chiefs have fallen into that sort of persona type that the Patriots fell into, where everyone basically now hates them and hopes they fail unless you're a Chiefs fan. But I'd like to see them get the three-peat, and so we can talk about a different type of legacy in the NFL other than the Patriots. So I'll put my money on the Chiefs for the moment and see if they can pull it out.
Yeah, I would say the Eagles are the most talented team in football outside of quarterback, and they just so happen to be going up against the best quarterback, which hurts me to say, as Joe Burrow's sort of sat over my left shoulder here. But I agree with you. Until someone can knock off the champ, you got to go and support the champ. So we'll definitely talk about the business end. I think regardless of what happens next week when we record, we'll have to talk about what our favorite commercials were, although I'm not sure in the UK if they show the American Super Bowl commercials.
That's a good question, actually. I think, if I remember correctly, they do not. And the best way to catch up on them will be, it depends. I think it's only through Sky or BBC broadcast. Yeah. And I think Sky has its own commentary they go to in the booth. So normally that's a big thing that we cover on Sports Pro afterwards is the best of the best from the ads perspective. And the main thing, I think, the hot topic around the Super Bowl really is all to do with what the ratings will be, because obviously there's been some dip in those numbers, but in general terms, but also a huge increase in the AFC Championship game, which is getting a lot of headlines. So that will be something to look at. And also they're incorporating more and more measures around streaming platforms as well. So see how those numbers come up and shape up. But this will come out just after that's all happened. So we'll be talking about this retrospectively. And then the week after, we'll be following up and chatting it all through. So we'll have a lot more information then.
Well, in a way that I try to do my best in segueing, we'll be talking about Super Bowl commercials, and we all know Super Bowl commercials are about driving commerce and driving conversions. So today seems like a perfect time to be talking specifically about e-commerce. So for today's podcast, we're going to really deep dive into e-commerce, sort of the path with which we've seen it, progress over the last few years. So we're really excited today to have 2 guests to really talk to us about the e-commerce space. So just to kick things off, I want to introduce Tarek Müller, who's the co-founder at SCAYLE, and Thomas Pyer, who's the director of growth at SCAYLE. So Tarek and Thomas, pleasure to have you on today.
Great to be here. Many thanks.
Likewise, pleasure to be here.
Now, before I, ask questions for you, I'll ask you, Nick, to just maybe contextualize a little bit. This podcast is about sports media. We spent a lot of time talking about streaming, but we've also expanded that more digitally within the media space. And we've talked quite a bit about e-commerce is one of the verticals within that, and more when we talk broadly about direct-to-consumer. I think initially direct-to-consumer felt like streaming platform subscriptions, but now it's that whole digital ecosystem. And whether it's, players like Amazon, who are largely an e-commerce platform, open up the streaming world, or other people trying to open up D2C, e-commerce is now becoming an important channel in that. So maybe before we hand things over, we just maybe contextualize a little bit sort of your view on what we talk about at StreamTime with e-commerce.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, just the notion of media now and digital is completely blurred. I think it's almost impossible to define what media is in this day and age. But we've talked about e-commerce on and off for a number of years now, and really, as I think we sit here today, that's the real big opportunity still sitting there for the sports industry to tap into. We've, the third party ecosystem that has been funding sports for a while is still there and is still strong, but for sports to really drive meaningful increase in monetization and value out of its fan base, it can do that through inefficient ways, through social media or in other media initiatives. But e-commerce is the best and most definitive way you can do it, because they can control that relationship directly with the fan. Now, we've been waiting for this to come and really spark. I have been anyway. I've been waiting for the e-commerce sort of ecosystem around sports to really come to life. And it feels like we focused on other areas, whether it be the betting side of things or hybrid monetization on OTT, etc., which is all fine. But actually, I've always felt that the e-commerce approach and ecosystem is the one that's going to bring that all to life and really start ramping up the value of fans and customers to sports. So I think we're only at the starting point of this sort of e-commerce journey in sports, and I'm really happy that we were able to hear from some experts in Tarek and Thomas to give us a bit of guidance as to what is enabling the opportunity, which they obviously do some great work in that space already, but indeed, how big is the actual opportunity? Because it still feels like we're so early on that journey, even though we all know e-commerce has been around for so long, and it's such a big part of our day-to-day lives as consumers. In sports, it's still only in its infancy, so I'm excited to get into that a little bit more.
So, Tarek, I think that's a good opportunity to kind of respond to some of those comments from Nick. And likewise, I think maybe perhaps setting the scene a little bit, sort of how we've seen e-commerce grow. I mean, I at least know for me, anecdotally, I never bought anything online before the pandemic. And now, post-COVID, unless it's jeans because I've got thick American thighs, or it's groceries, I don't buy anything. I exclusively buy online. So even for me, over the span of the last 5 years, things have changed. So it'd be great to kind of hear just sort of your thoughts on what Nick said there, but then also giving us a little bit of a rundown, sort of how you've seen e-commerce take shape over the last few years.
Yeah, great. So I think I started my first online shop 20 years ago. Back then, things were pretty simple. You set up, a very basic online shop. You had, basic logistics and credit cards, and that's basically it. And then you had Google as a marketing channel. Yeah, so things were simple, but also the magnitude of growth you could achieve with this kind of simple setup was obviously limited. Now, that has obviously changed dramatically. I not only co-founded SCAYLE, but also a company called About You, which is a fashion e-com player here in Europe. I took it public 3 years ago. And I founded the company 10 years ago, and today we are already at $5 billion revenue. So that's massive. Yeah. And that kind of shows you how fast it can go. Obviously, things have become much more complex. You obviously have to manage much more in terms of logistics, payments, user interfaces. You obviously have, a desktop version, but obviously also a mobile app version. If you're multinational, you also have to deal with, all kinds of currency and custom issues, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, you obviously have a lot of marketing channels. Yeah. So next to Google, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. So things have become more complex, but it actually also creates massive opportunities for creating, a very sizable business with only the online channel. And then as you have mentioned, Chris, obviously COVID was a huge accelerator in online penetration. So I think now everyone has shopped online and they are used to it. So this creates massive opportunities. And I'm not a sports guy, I have to admit. So I've created all kinds of online shops. I'm an e-commerce child. But if I look on sports, what I see is basically I'm an e-com guy and a marketing guy. So I tend to take a marketing look on things. So what I see basically when looking at sports brands is a huge fan base. Yeah. So in other words, this is, the marketing funnel, the upper funnel is filled with people that are liking the brand, that first of all are brand aware and that have a huge, emotion towards that brand. I mean, imagine how expensive it is for an e-com player or retailer in general to build that kind of funnel of people knowing the brand and then actually liking the brand, that which, you can't even do this with money in most cases. Kind of, brand awareness you can do with money. Creating emotion, you need money and creativity. Now, looking at a brand like Nike, for example, how much money are they generating out of the brand awareness and emotion they create from their basically fan base? And if you compare this to sports brands, it's just obvious that there's huge gap. And I think that gap can be filled today because of e-commerce, because distribution now can be scaled easily. You don't need thousands of brick and mortar stores anymore. But you need one digital destination. Everyone is used to, buying online worldwide, like even in developed countries, like not developed countries, e-commerce is there. Logistics is rolled out globally. So there's everything basically. And they obviously need to do it right, kind of from a e-commerce perspective, and they need the right products. Yeah? And the right products are beyond, this whatever shitty merchandise that we all know, but if they, get it right, kind of do the e-commerce experience right, combined with a great product, they basically have a filled up funnel to convert people and monetize that.
So in terms of other influences, COVID's one of them, but I would just say, what else have you seen that's perhaps influencing this change? Because I think there was a funny quote we heard, Nick, from the former CTO of Real Madrid, Michael Sutherland, was sort of, what's caused your digital transformation? Is it your CTO or was it COVID? And just sort of the things that are impacting this, surely there were some things that, changed the influence the behavior beyond COVID. Is it because of the accessibility with e-commerce? Is it just people growing more comfortable with it? What are some of the factors that have kind of driven the growth of e-commerce?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of possibility to distribute globally via e-commerce without kind of assets, without heavy assets that you have to build, like brick and mortar stores and 10-year leases, etc. So basically, the barrier to entry, basically a global distribution, has massively decreased thanks to e-commerce. On the other hand, customers are used to e-commerce, and then I think there's a third aspect, and this is the kind of the players. Yeah. So I mean, these young folks, they are digital. And we all know this. I mean, with one posting, from someone with the right audience and reach, which could be the club, but also the respective, players in the club, you can generate tens of millions of dollars within, hours. And there's just no other channel where this is possible. So it's just creating massive opportunity to create massive revenues. And it's not only, a revenue where, you obviously make a profit out, but like it's also a trophy that people have at home. Yeah. So when buying a great product from a great club you admire, you have that at your home, or you wear it, or whatever it is, so it also creates loyalty. So I think it's actually, from a club's perspective, it's a no-brainer to enter into e-commerce and basically D2C. It's not e-commerce just the tool for, in other words, going D2C and kind of selling stuff directly to the consumer/fan on the back of this e-commerce machine that today is possible thanks to new technologies. It's easy to set up an online shop thanks to, logistical networks, etc. It's easy to have a global distribution, and you have the players. And if you have them on board, maybe, promoting the products that you want to sell through D2C, if they are great, so you have to go beyond this kind of shitty merchandise phase, then it just makes sense for everyone. The fan is happy because they get something, the club can make money, and the players or everyone can basically present themselves, or in a way basically stay top of mind by giving the consumer something they can identify with. Yeah. Be it a clothing, be it whatever, tools, whatever it can be. There are a million possibilities to do that.
So, Thomas, I'm curious from your perspective, why has it taken, or what are some of the complexities as to why sports, I believe, I'm not sure if this is a theory, but the sports is way behind the curve when it comes to e-commerce. Is there things that you could share that you've experienced within SCAYLE in particular, or more general terms, that could give us a sense as to why it is so complex or difficult for them to get up and running and achieve some of the things that Tarek's talking about?
Yeah, probably two things from my point of view. The first is, if you look at the growth of sports clubs and organizations over the past years, a lot of it has been driven by other revenue sources. So if you look at the broadcasting rights, for example, they're just at astronomical values, right? The Premier League closing 6.7 billion deal for domestic broadcasting rights over the 4-year period. You've got Adidas and Nike dishing out 100 million euro contracts for certain clubs and federations. Sponsoring has gone through the roof. So clubs have not probably had the necessity to grow their D2C channel, such as other organizations. And secondly, you shouldn't underestimate the complexity that you are bringing in-house. You do have to make decisions about the tech stack. You do have to have a logistics network that you are going to use to distribute your products globally. And you do have to have a marketing machine to connect with your audience. So I think these two things in combinations have probably prevented sports clubs from going direct to consumer in the past. But I'm persuaded that if you look at the next 10 years, you won't be able to raise ticket prices indefinitely. You're going to get the backlash. Broadcasting deals, sponsorship deals are probably going to plateau at some point. And I think the next wave of growth for a lot of sports clubs and organizations will come from direct to consumer. And it's especially relevant if you think about the constraints that some of these clubs have in terms of financial fair play, profit and sustainability rules, because revenue recognition, as opposed to just receiving a licensing fee from a managed service provider, is absolutely essential for clubs to keep investing into what matters most, which is success on the pitch, good players, which command high salaries.
In terms of the opportunity specifically for sports, Tarek mentioned quite rightly that sports, it's got brand awareness, but it's also got the emotional attachment to it. So given it's really, kind of the conversation we're having now is just scratching the surface, how large is the opportunity for e-commerce within sports to, how big can it get?
Yeah, I think a lot of clubs can grow their D2C revenues by 2 to 3x compared to current levels. I mean, if you look at the revenues that clubs like Real Madrid, Manchester United, or Bayern Munich, some of the largest sports clubs in Europe, generate, if you strip away the revenues that are not generated by the club, i.e. broadcasting, and then you strip away sponsorship and all the offline revenues, online DTC revenues only account for about 5 to 7% of a club's revenues. And that is a huge pocket of growth. I believe, for three reasons, right? Tarek mentioned the first one. The audiences are just phenomenal. Manchester United has 270 million social followers. We talked about the Super Bowl. Liverpool versus Manchester United, which is played twice a season, is watched by 400 to 600 million people around the world. That's 2x the Super Bowl, twice a year. And the second one is the ability to really provide your customers with a unified commerce experience. A lot of clubs have different revenue streams in D2C. They don't only have the e-com shop, they have a TV subscription, they have ticketing, they have membership and loyalty programs, and then their e-commerce shop. And being able to provide everything in a unified commerce view, instead of customers having to log into 4 or 5 different offerings, for me is a big opportunity. And the third one, I truly believe in the value of loyalty and membership. What Tarek said, right? I think a lot of brands would die for the assets that clubs like Manchester United and Bayern have at their hand to create such memorable experiences for their most loyal members. You know, be it match day invitations, be it meet and greet with the players or the managers, be it visits to the training facilities. These are things that not a lot of organizations can offer. So if you combine all of that world of opportunity, I'm persuaded that that share of revenue can easily grow from 5 to 7 to 10 to 15%.
That's obviously a significant jump, Thomas. Why do you think, from the conversations and work you've done in the industry, why haven't more moved quicker? My view or sense of it is everyone looks like it's a new monetization opportunity, and obviously have recognized for a while that digital is a big area of growth because of that direct relationship we've just been talking about, and somewhat indirect if you talk about social followers, depending on how you want to frame that. But the other complexity is the business side, the actual other deals that exist around licensing arrangements and so forth. I don't know if this is something you can talk about, but it would be great to give a sense for those who aren't working in that club environment in particular we're referring to. Why is that sometimes complex for them to launch their own e-commerce shop in the scale that maybe people would expect? As a fan, they don't know the business side. They just, well, why can't I just buy everything from one place? And actually, they've got to go to 3 or 4 different places. So why is it so complex?
Well, again, I think a lot of clubs have just not invested in that particular capability over the last 10 years. Although, to be fair, you know, there have been some exceptions. Liverpool FC, for example, was one of the direct-to-consumer pioneers. They went direct-to-consumer about 9 or 10 years ago. Bayern Munich, we believe, is a very, very strong contender for one of the best D2C offerings in the world in terms of sports clubs. And we're seeing more and more clubs move that direction. But if you look at the history of sports clubs, a lot of times it was the kit manufacturers who actually ran the e-com shops in the early 2000s. And then a lot of clubs transitioned to managed service providers like Fanatics and were locked in to contracts which lasted for a very long time. So they didn't have the necessity to build up that capability. And as we said, they had a lot of revenue growth from other sources. But I think slowly the sports world is waking up to the opportunity that lies out there, and they see the success cases of Liverpool, of Bayern, of Manchester United, and they realize how important it is not only to generate revenue but also to create that connection with a fan. I'm convinced sports clubs should have the North Star that fans should never have a better experience than with their club. That's a worthwhile North Star, and I think that's what clubs like Bayern Munich are moving towards. And that's the North Star that you can rally the troops behind, and that everything falls in place after that. You know, if you do right by the fan, the numbers will follow.
So Tarek, you mentioned you've launched other brands, you know, particularly around the fashion space. Is there anything that you've brought from that slightly different vertical into sports that you think that sports was lacking before, or what degree of expertise are you bringing from other different e-commerces specifically into the sports strategy?
Yeah, maybe just before going to that, I just wanted to add to Thomas basically on this kind of doubling, tripling the revenue. I think this is if you get the basics right. Yeah, so selling a jersey done right, selling merchandise done right. But I think, and that's doable. I mean, we've proven it with SCAYLE and our customers like Bayern and Manchester that, you know, this is doable within years, and like doesn't take long, 2-3 years. But I mean, the opportunity goes far ahead. Like, why wouldn't you consider yourselves as a lifestyle brand or a fashion brand as well and go beyond jerseys? Because like obviously a jersey you can't wear in your daily life. You can't go to the office with a jersey. Or, I mean, maybe you can in some jobs, but in most jobs probably it's not decent. Yeah. But what some clubs have started is to see themselves as a lifestyle brand as well, and then kind of produce, a normal t-shirt, a normal shirt, where you have like a very small, maybe, logo symbol, where other fans would obviously recognize it immediately, but someone that is not a fan would not recognize it. It's just, a good looking, whatever shirt, sweatshirt, but you can identify yourself in your daily life, even in office, everywhere, with these products. It could also be a bag. It could be, a weekend. There are, a cup. There are a million things where you basically have to move beyond kind of this super flashy, merchandise. And then I think the opportunities even beyond doubling, tripling your revenue, which you do just by getting the basics right. Yeah? And what is getting the basics right is the 101 on e-commerce, so which most brands have actually not done right so far for the reasons that Thomas have laid out. So it's having a good customer experience when you go into the online shop. It starts with a category navigation search, a smartphone. It's the boring stuff, and then you enter a checkout, you find all your payment methods. It is seamless. After you've ordered, you get nice newsletters. You get maybe a birthday email. If you haven't ordered for a long time, you get a reactivation email with maybe a small voucher. You do campaigning and promotions correctly, that you don't discount things that you would sell full price anyways, but you discount the things that you have too much on your warehouse, and that you do marketing right, that if someone Googles for a jersey, that they end up on your own online shop and not on Amazon or some intermediary platform. These are all things that obviously are very important next to kind of the really basic technical things like site speed, for example. It starts already there. If you open a couple of the online shops of the big clubs, it takes ages to load, and you have a shitty website, you have no app, and you don't have the payment methods at hand. Yeah. So it's actually kind of getting the basics right, and that's for the start. And then I think this you can typically do within 6 months if you have the right technology. And then you can start with the fun stuff that Thomas has already explained with, okay, you buy, more than 500 euro per year, you get whatever, a meet and greet, or, whatever, you combine things and basically give your fans an incentive to actually buy at your online shop, given that you already have a great online shop, and you put a small incentive on top basically to actually make them buy the products at your own online shop. And I think then the next stage is actually expansion of products, that you basically increase the share of wallet within your fan base, because there should not only be no reason to not buy the jersey on your own D2C's club page. This you should make sure within 6 months by choosing the right technology and the right partner. But I think looking ahead kind of a couple of years, there should be no reason to not buy also adjacent lifestyle products at your favorite club. But this obviously then goes beyond just, getting the tech right, etc., but goes into product development, etc., and also a presence, etc., to give basically to buy a present for Christmas, birthday, etc., for your partner if they are a fan of a club. And these kind of things, because this increases ultimately share of wallet, and it's all based on a good technology. And here it doesn't matter what you sell. So I've built 20 online shops in my life. I've sold all kinds of things online. So for getting the basics right in e-commerce is actually independent of what you're selling ultimately, because the e-commerce experience is kind of technically always the same, no matter what you buy at the end of the end of the journey. And then I think maybe, Thomas, you can deep dive on a couple of things that we've developed with Bayern and Manchester United that are sports specific, like the jersey configurator and kind of auction platform, etc. Because I think these things are then really cool, where the fan also recognizes that this is something beyond Amazon, basically.
Yeah, I think working with sports organizations in general have sort of reinforced some of the principles that we believe in at SCAYLE. In terms of the technology, we just believe that your technology has to be flexible, and you have to have the capability to integrate with a lot of other third-party systems, as we call them, or the ability to create add-ons, the ability to create outstanding shopping experiences. So, for example, what we have done for Bayern Munich and Manchester United are really cool jersey configurators, where you can type in your name, the number, you have live previews of that T-shirt, which increases the number of customers who actually want to print on their shirt. Bayern Munich have integrated an auction tool on their website. So, after a match day, a player signs a jersey, it's uploaded on the website, and then fans can bid on that jersey. And then within 24 hours, it's sent to the highest bidder. We're experimenting in the next months and years with features that About You is very akin to, like live shopping, where you could have club legends doing interviews and promoting products for exclusive launches. So it's, again, that flexibility and that ability to create outstanding shopping experience is something we believe in. Then in terms of features, Tarek mentioned it, right? Localization. Every fan should have a native experience, whether that fan is in South Korea, Australia, Jamaica, United States, or Brazil, right? And that's what we believe in. It's the right languages, currencies, payment methods, sorting, promotions for national holidays. You want that fan to feel at home, not only in the case of Manchester United within a very short or small radius within Old Trafford, but everywhere around the world.
So I just want to quickly talk, because I believe you've got a Bayern Munich story that aligns with this. But I think one of the things about sports, perhaps compared to other brands, is, if Nike's doing a release, you probably know about that a couple months in advance. You can plan, you can be prepared for it. But then I think about what happened in the NBA last week, where out of nowhere, Luka Doncic gets traded to the Lakers, and now all of a sudden someone's going to have to mass produce and be ready to, send out however many thousands of Luka Doncic jerseys. I think you guys had a similar situation with Bayern Munich, but I think it is worth just kind of talking about from an e-commerce perspective. You do get things like this that pop up really quickly. So, in the world of football with transfers, how does an e-commerce platform, prepare for something like that when you're going to get a big move like that?
Yeah, I think I would make an opening statement and then hand over to Tarek because he's got much more experience handling large volumes on online sites. But, yes, when a player like Harry Kane moves to Bayern Munich, or when you have these big kit releases or transfer news, there is a massive spike in the number of visits and the number of orders. But still, even the likes of Manchester United and Bayern Munich, the visits and the orders that they create within a short period are nowhere near what we experience with other retailers and brands on our platform, like About You. Tarek mentioned they generate 5 billion in gross turnover a year. Just imagine the craziness on a Black Friday for About You, right? That eclipses any kit release or transfer in the football world. And then Tarek can also comment on this, but I think in the year of 2025, scaling of your tech capabilities should no longer be an issue, right? It should no longer be an issue nowadays that your website doesn't work because of a spike in traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is getting the basics right. I mean, we all know that technology evolves super fast. If you're on technology stacks that are 10 years old, it's a huge problem to kind of cope with kind of these type of spikes. If you're on a modern technology, it's absolutely no problem anymore. I mean, at About You, we actually sell Nike. So About You is a multi-brand retailer. So we sell Nike, Adidas, etc. So we also we are fortunate to be one of the largest kind of wholesale clients of Nike. So we always get this allocation of these like sneaker drops. Yeah. So when we drop a very hot sneaker of Nike, it's like within seconds we generate millions of dollars and revenue. We generate within minutes. We generate more revenue than the largest clubs generate in a year through their D2C. So handling spikes is no problem for us because we are on a modern technology. But that also, tells me that there's just huge opportunity. Obviously, it's cool and crazy from a club's perspective if, an NBA star transfers or Harry Kane transfers to Bayern Munich and, everyone is super excited. But if I look at the numbers, I can tell you, I think that's like kindergarten. Yeah. And then if I see that basically the brand awareness of the clubs that we are talking to is higher than the brand awareness of the e-commerce store that I'm operating with About You. And, if you ask how many people are loving my company About You or love, Manchester United or Bayern, like they will exceed the numbers by far. Yet, they are not able to generate revenue out of this. That gives me the indication of, we are way far away from being where the potential lies, basically in terms of D2C. And I'm also not sure what the reasons are. I mean, I think first of all, getting the basics right, and then adding a couple of cool features, what Thomas have explained, like live shopping and jersey configurator, things you won't find on Amazon. I think that's basically the comparable you have. You have to give your fan a good reason to not go to Amazon, but basically buy at your own D2C. And I think live shopping and these kind of things are cool reasons. And then I'm sure in the next years we will see clubs basically figuring out also the product side and making sure that they really generate more like hundreds of millions in revenue within a day and not tens of millions through a jersey, because a jersey is limited. Yeah, there are not that many people out of the fan base that actually want to have a jersey. But since, for example, none of your fans is running around naked, they constantly buy things. So why not, tapping into that and kind of increasing the share of wallet of your fan?
I've got so many questions to follow up on that comment, Tarek, because one of the things that stuck to me as a personal example, I was in Miami recently, and my son, who's never even watched basically a full life football match other than one match with England and one or two matches with England, and he was adamant he wanted a Messi shirt. And then I was like, sure, we can look to get you one there. And then I went to the shops there, and I think it was like $160 for a kid's. He's 7 years old or 6 years old. $160 for a shirt, the official shirt, and the shorts were on top of that. You go around the corner though, and there's market selling the rip-off stuff at a fraction of the price, and that just got me thinking a lot about the e-commerce space and like the challenge because of these licensing deals that exist with your Nikes and Adidases and so forth that do often underwrite some of these issues we're talking about the speed we've moved around e-commerce. How important is that price point bit to open up new fan bases? I've got a follow-up question on this on the business side more, but it feels like if clubs were to try and take things in-house, I don't know if this is actually good business or not, but the price point, if you're charging the extremes that some of the major brands are charging now, you are limiting who you're going to buy your product. And at some point, must be a tipping point where you open up a new set of buyers if you bring out to a more reasonable price point, because there's no way general parents are going to spend $160 every year or two on a shirt unless they are either very, very affluent or a super fan. So I don't know if that sets the scene well there, but I'll be curious to get your take on all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the main reasons why a lot of clubs are moving to a direct-to-consumer model, right? Is what Tarek explained, is to be able to expand the product offering. But in order to expand the product offering, you need control over your range. It shouldn't be someone like Fanatics operating your e-com store, because then they buy the range and they don't have the same desire to grow that range, to increase the number of products that fans can buy from your club. You have to have control over it, and that's only possible with a direct-to-consumer model. And we've seen clubs do that repeatedly. Within a few months of Bayern Munich moving to our platform SCAYLE, they actually collaborated with About You to launch a lifestyle collection, which was hugely successful. Manchester United, within a few months of going direct-to-consumer, have now released 2 mono-brand ranges, as they call them. Not Adidas, but they source and design the products themselves and then sell them exclusively through their online store. So there was the Manchester United Heritage range, for example, which I think is a beautiful range, priced at about £20 to £40 per clothing item, which is a far more accessible product. And just as Tarek said, helps increase the reach and relevance of your brand and your penetration.
It's not an either or, yeah. So obviously it makes sense to take the money, of Nike and Adidas and, produce these £160 kits, and there are people buying it. That's totally fine. But I think, it shouldn't be the only thing you have at offer, because Nick, as you rightfully said, like it's more of a niche product at that price point. So, deliver to the people who are willing to pay such a premium, but then, make sure you also have products for someone looking at a more decent price point. And then you're competing with, everyone else, but you have the asset of the club, of the player, etc. And then why would your son, want to buy whatever, and Tommy Hilfiger or whatever, T-shirt, when they can also get a Messi T-shirt, but then I'm 100% with you. You have to compete on price quality, and then you have the asset of your club. But it's a massive market opportunity. So you obviously have a little bit less relative margin, but at much higher quantities.
You mentioned the word margins there. I'm just curious about what that looks like at a macro level. Well, obviously you can go into as many specifics as you can, but one of the things with e-commerce is, as you add all these different players and layers to it, whether it's, let's say, if you're using an Amazon e-commerce store and you're doing it through a relationship you have with a brand, and all of a sudden the return on the e-commerce side gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Give us just a sense of how that pie looks. So if someone buys a shirt from $100 and it's doing it through a third-party e-commerce platform, like an Amazon, let's just say, versus doing it through your own, what's the pie look like in terms of percentage of money coming back to the club or the league in this instance?
Yeah, I mean, generally club going D2C should land somewhere at around 20 to 25% EBIT margin. Yeah, so that's quite massive. It's much more than a typical retailer. And then it depends on how vertical they are. Yeah, so if they are basically producing the stuff themselves and they are completely verticalized, they can go even beyond 20-25%. If they are mainly buying in wholesale from partners they gave a license to, then it's less, but then they also make money with the license. Yeah. So basically the system is they give a license to whatever Adidas and Nike. So they get a license cut out of this. Nike and Adidas are producing the jerseys, and then they are selling these jerseys to wholesale clients, to basically brick and mortar stores, etc. So what a club can do is they can become a wholesale client themselves, buy the products in wholesale. And then if you are very wholesale heavy, you're probably more towards 20% EBIT margin. If you're more vertical, you can go beyond 30 even. Yeah. And then it depends on the cost of goods you sell. Yeah. Generally, you have somewhere around 10 to 15% for logistics and fulfillment. Then you have maybe 3% or so for payment, 1% for customer service. And then depending on whether you buy in wholesale or whether you produce yourselves, you're somewhere around 40% or so in cost of goods. And then you have a bit of marketing costs. Yeah. And that's basically it in terms of costs, plus basically obviously operating the online shop itself. So for technology, you typically pay 1%. For, to whatever technology provider you're using, like SCAYLE, like Shopify, like someone else. And then you have obviously a team and your fixed cost base, kind of the people that are working on your online shop. As a rule of thumb, I would say that should be around 3 to 5% of your costs should be personal costs, yeah, which translates into a team of like 10 to 15 people managing the online shop, yeah, including marketing channels, etc. Like that's your setup. And yeah, again, then you should be able to do 20 to 30% EBIT margin. So it's a very profitable business. Now, if you go through channels like Amazon, the margin will be less because you're paying commissions to the marketplace. And I mean, in former times, you could argue, yes, you pay commissions, but you save on the marketing. I think this has changed because today, basically, platforms like Amazon, they not only charge a commission, but they basically kind of force/incentivize you to do marketing on the platform because you don't get the visibility. We all know this, like with all the sponsored products, etc. So the case, as in former times, basically switching commission to marketing to commission is not true anymore. So the profit margin on an Amazon will be less than in your own D2C. And additionally, when selling in your own D2C, you build cohorts, yeah, because in marketing, you acquire a customer once, and then if you have great CRM, you can have repeat purchases without another marketing incentive. So you basically have what marketing guy would call customer lifetime value that you're building in profitable cohorts on top to the, things that you can do when obviously owning your own D2C is if you bring new product ranges out, you can email directly, which are, these kind of direct to consumer relationship and kind of the channel to communicate with your consumer is obviously not there if you go through Amazon. That's why it's not only more profitable, but typically you also see more revenue because you can achieve more a higher buying frequency out of customers acquired in your own online shops thanks to the CRM measures, push notifications, etc. that you can deliver.
So just specifically with Man U and Bayern Munich, you're talking about two of the most recognizable brands in football across the globe. You would think, or maybe people on the outside would think, these are two massive brands. They probably have everything figured out. But I appreciate the partners are maybe some things you can't talk about, but like, whether there's a tender process or something, what exactly were the challenges that they brought to you that they were looking to solve to expand their e-commerce business?
Yeah, in the case, just probably starting with Manchester United, it was exactly what we spoke about, right? The limitations that they at some point reached with an outsourced business model, which has nothing to do with the provider of that outsourced business model, but just the pure limitations of that model in terms of not being able to better understand your audience because you don't own the data. And what Tarek said, the ability to better understand your audience, to tailor your offering to that audience, and to drive customer lifecycle value over time with that audience. And then the ability to service them with better offerings, right? Increasing your product range with products that they would wear in everyday life and not only the jersey to the match day. And then the lack of the ability to create that unified commerce experience across different revenue streams. And at some point, I think the pain just became too big, and the prize was, or the opportunity cost of staying with an outsourced business model was just too big to continue. So that was more of a strategic shift that Manchester United made. And I think we were just positioned as a very good partner because we not only provide outstanding technology, but we are really committed after go live to help clubs grow the reach and relevance of their online stores, owing to the experience that we have, for example, through About You, our sister company that Tarek mentioned. And also most of us here at SCAYLE just live and breathe e-commerce and have a lot of experience in sports, fashion, and lifestyle.
Yeah, and doing all of this on a global scale, I think, is very important because, like, sports clubs nowadays, in most cases are global brands, not local brands anymore. Yeah, so that obviously adds an extra layer of complexity that we are well aware of because About You is operating in 28 countries, and we have customers like Harrods, operating in every country in the world, and a lot of other clients of us are operating globally. So that's another layer of complexity that you have to solve. But the opportunity is huge because, like, especially in countries where maybe the overall market size is not that large, it can be very successful to launch a D2C because they have no alternatives. Yeah, if you, like Nick, you mentioned, you want to buy a Messi jersey in Miami, there are plenty of places where you can buy that in Miami, I guess. But if you're living in whatever country that is not that developed in terms of retail infrastructure, there is often no place where you can buy this. Obviously, the absolute number of people willing to buy is less than people in Miami wanting to buy a Messi jersey. But like if you go to African countries and I was in Cape Town last year and met a guy who was wearing a Manchester United jersey. Yeah, so because he was a hardcore Manchester United fan, like there are not that many places where you can buy this there. And if you then do D2C right on a global scale, you actually catch all the demand in those countries at high profits.
I'm curious on to that point. I think there's an interesting conversation, a question around again the fan that we've talked about and how many touch points. So typically when marketers are looking at the relationship with a customer, you're looking at maybe touch points on how many touch points you need to get someone to convert into a customer or a transaction or a sale. I'm curious because of the thing with football or many sports, but particularly with football clubs, as we've been talking about, is that these huge follower bases online who are consuming them through either broadcast or through streaming or through social media. What are some of the typical journeys like, or the frequency of touch points required to get someone to convert to an e-commerce customer on a platform? Is it quite often is there a large proportion just arriving on the platform out of nowhere, maybe because they've been following on social, but they've never been a first-party data component of the audience set that maybe a major club has, and they'll just go straight through the transaction quite easily? Or do you normally have to make sure they're a part of the ecosystem through a first-party data relationship already to get to that point? Does that make sense?
So from my point of view, basically, you have to differentiate in customer acquisition between two cases. There's the case where someone has the intent to buy something, like you and your son. You wanted to buy something. You already knew you wanted to buy something where there's a Messi logo on it or whatever. So in that case, it typically doesn't require that many touch points. You have to be where the customer is looking for it. So in online, that typically means Google. Yeah, because typically people would search on Google for a product that they intend to buy. And or you have to already have built that brand awareness that your own D2C is great, that you basically go beyond that Google step and type in the URL of your club directly. Like, this is basically not adding incrementality to the overall market size. So that by capturing demand, it doesn't mean that more people are buying a jersey, but it means that those that are buying a jersey shall buy that on your own D2C because it increases your margin and, gets this first party data and so on and so forth. Now, that is basically shifting channels, between whatever in former times you would have bought it on Amazon or in a brick and mortar store, and you should buy it on D2C, and therefore you need Google. Mainly Google is the main channel there, plus basically whatever you can do to build this awareness through social media, etc. What I think is equally interesting and can become even larger is kind of demand creating. Yeah. So you didn't know you wanted to buy that product. You saw it, and then it clicks and you say, okay, I'll buy it. Now here, obviously Instagram and TikTok are huge channels, and there it often requires more than a touch point. It often requires you seeing it maybe on your favorite player and afterwards on the social media channel of your club, maybe afterwards an influencer's posting it or whatever, and then it clicks and you buy it. Yeah. Or obviously also through ads. Yeah. So Instagram ads, TikTok ads are very interesting here. or Twitch, obviously also an increasingly interesting channel. YouTube is an interesting channel where you can basically promote products where, there's not an existing demand for it, but you have to create that demand by showing the product to people that didn't know that product exists, basically. And here, what I believe also going forward, or what I believe will happen, is that in 10 years, if clubs basically sign like deals with these like well-known players like Harry Kane or NBA players or whatever, that I think they will think that already when at the time of the signature of the contract, to not only produce a jersey, but maybe produce more products that go beyond jersey, that are relevant for the community of that respective player, because they often bring more reach than the club itself in TikTok and Instagram. And then they basically promote it through their own channels, and then often it requires more than one touch point. But this can really become massive in terms of volume these guys are generating. Yeah.
So just conscious of timing, wrapping up, but one of the things just we talked about earlier on, just the whole role this fits within direct-to-consumer. I think Manchester United's an interesting example because we know that Man U has a streaming platform, which is already kind of a part of their direct-to-consumer process. But just in terms of, there's obviously, you guys are going to talk about the amount of money that can be made from the e-commerce sales themselves, but there's also the other side of D2C, which is about the first-party data capture. So maybe when you're speaking to these partners and you're talking to them, about the advantages of, increased sales, there's also the increased value of having more first-party data. So whether that's someone like Manchester United, where the data they're going to get from an e-commerce platform first party is different than the data they're going to get from their first party streaming platform, sort of where our e-commerce sits in that. And then just the overall value of having that first party data, which could be someone like a Harrods, where it's not necessarily sports related, but now all of a sudden you're just collecting more first party data. So maybe just what's the general value beyond just increasing sales, but also collecting more of that data?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I used to work at Adidas for quite a while before I joined SCAYLE, and we always believed that direct to consumer was important because it informed all the other channels, right? So we were not DTC first, but we were DTC led. And what that meant was the insights that we gained from the direct to consumer channel informed everything else, because it was that instant feedback that we got as compared to wholesale, right? Where creation cycles, sell-in cycles, and then sales cycles themselves are just much longer. But just imagine for a club, how else would you know what customers are probably searching for on your e-com page, which isn't available? You have that instantaneously, and then you can feed that back into the creation cycle and start creating products. That would take years with an outsourced provider. How do you know where customers are clicking on the page, which products they're clicking on a product listing page? All these things are just so valuable. And then what I really like about Manchester United, they do have a customer data platform which collects information from all their revenue streams, right? To be able to say what is really valuable for the fan. Does he want to buy something from the e-com store and also a membership? Or does he want to buy something in the e-com store and also an MUTV subscription? I think it's just so, obviously you have to be able to make sense of the data, but just having that data in the first place is an absolute imperative. I don't think in the next 10 years you will have a competitive advantage by not having that data.
So, Thomas, I'm wondering, you're having this conversation with, obviously we've talked about some very big clubs like Bayern Munich and Man United in this instance. There'll be some clubs that aren't quite as big, and also teams and leagues and competitions that have a similar opportunity and challenge ahead of them to look at e-commerce. What happens once they have a green light with SCAYLE? How long does it take to get up and running? And what are some of the nuances of getting up and running that you'd have to consider if you were looking at it?
Yeah, to your first point, if you should go D2C or not, and then how long it takes. I think for me, there are always three questions you need to answer, right? One is, do your customers have an appetite to buy from you directly? Secondly, can you make money from it? And thirdly, do you have world-class capabilities in direct-to-consumer? If you see green light on all of those, then yes, you should move to direct-to-consumer. In the case of Manchester United and Bayern Munich, the answer on the first two questions is an absolute resounding yes, right? And number three is where we come in. We provide clubs with the world-class capabilities in the direct-to-consumer channel. Once you sign a contract with SCAYLE in that event, it would typically take about 6 months to go live. Even if you're moving from a completely outsourced business model to an in-house business model with SCAYLE. In the case of Manchester United, I think it took us 6 to 7 months. But don't forget the undertaking that is, right? It's not only setting up the tech stack, it's setting up a whole logistics network. It's setting up the team on the ground that's able to operate that tech stack and create those connections with other functions like products and marketing and customer service.
And so where does the line draw for SCAYLE in terms of that? When you're there, say a club, you're working with a club and they're looking to work with you guys in that instance, are you giving them guidance on where are you giving them guidance on what are you actually doing for them? Is there a line like you have to say to them, look, it's on you to sort out logistics and we'll sort out all the technology capabilities to make sure it all works? Or are you helping some of them through that part as well? Because I imagine that the challenge can be sometimes some clubs don't have that internal expertise to manage it. Or do you point them to a third party that can help them?
Yeah, absolutely. We've brought over 200 online shops live, so mostly in sports, fashion, and lifestyle. So we have a lot of experience with different setups and different third parties, as you called them. Typically at SCAYLE, what we do is we provide the technology stack, the back end of the online store. Things like logistics are carried out by other providers, but again, we are able to point clubs and retailers and brands in general into the right direction, which always depends, right? Where do you want your warehouses? Where are you distributing to primarily? But yes, we're able to help customers.
Yeah, and additionally to the kind of whole operation set, also in terms of marketing, to kind of set up the Google marketing right and Instagram, TikTok marketing ads, kind of advising a little bit on how to maybe incentivize a player to also post on their own channels, setting up CRM, helping with the right emails, etc. I mean, since we're not only a technology provider, but we also operate our own e-com business with 5 billion being, one of the largest e-com shops in the world, and overall through the SCAYLE technology, more than $10 billion in yearly revenues running. So it's a huge scale. Obviously, we have a huge network of partners, and we have knowledge on how to operate that business very profitably. Yeah, again, I mean, kind of comparing here the sports clubs and mentioning again back to the numbers, like a sports club with a global reach should at least make 100 million euro per year in revenue at least 20 to 30% EBIT margin. And I mean, that's basically status quo. And I'm sure if we speak in a couple of years, we'll see clubs that are going beyond $1 billion in D2C revenue at, very high margins. So it is a very, very significant opportunity you have at hand. And as Thomas said, given that maybe other channels are plateauing a little bit, that is a massive opportunity to increase profits.
Yeah, I think that's something Nick and I have certainly talked about, the need for sports to diversify their revenues, because as you say, there is a degree of stagnation. We talk about it every week, whether it's Ligue 1 in France or whoever it is struggling, that they do need to figure out other ways. And I appreciate Tarek and Thomas, you joining us today. We've got a whole lot of other things to talk about, but I think it is worth noting to our listeners that SCAYLE will be at Sports Pro New York next month doing a case study with Bayern Munich, which will be more in-depth to some of the things we spoke about today. So obviously go find them there. They'll also be at Sports Pro Live at the end of the month in April. So, hopefully this is a good introduction for everybody. Anyone that has e-commerce questions, trying to figure out where to grow in that space, they will be with us in person. So obviously great time to meet them face to face. Maybe Thomas and Tarek, is there anything you want to shout out in terms of best way to get in hold of you guys, whether it's social media on LinkedIn or emails, or just sort of the best place they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, we've got a website, SCAYLE.com, so that SCAYLE, the AY reflecting our About You heritage. We're also both on LinkedIn, so if anyone has questions regarding e-com and sports, you know where to find us.
Absolutely. We will definitely share all of that along. So Tarek and Thomas, appreciate you for joining us today. And yeah, great to hear more about e-commerce, because like I said, I think it's a space in the D2C world that's only going to explode. And Tarek, you sort of left us with some pretty gaudy numbers as to what our expectations should be and why everybody should be moving to this space.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsProNick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, StreamTimers. Until next time.